Welcome to the chaos sector. First off, I feel it's necessary to address those who criticize us in regards to get a clue. Some claim this is nonsense, and it has nothing to do with getting justice for those victims. You're wasting time, etc. Well, this is important. This is not a waste of time. This is very important to the case and definitely helps in getting justice for the victims. Please do not lump the chaos in with some YouTube drama between content creators. When we address someone, it's about the content, which is about the case. There is nothing personal being addressed. It is only about that individual's claims or perspective about the investigation into the murders. Now, if that content creator is revealed to be of a certain character in relation to the case, well, that's on them. I would tend to think integrity is key, right? So please do not attempt to push that narrative. If a vehicle spotted in the Linda Lane surveillance was driven by Moscow PD officers, you do realize that they would have knowledge of those murders before sunrise, right? We broke that down prior. Now we're about to physically show that that vehicle was present in that surveillance. If Moscow PD was circling Queen Road apartments during the time frame of 3:30 a.m. to 4:07 a.m., this is extremely important to the case. It proves that not only were they in the neighborhood scoping the area, but they were more than likely involved in tampering with any and all evidence in that home, prior to any alleged friends arriving sometime later. If Get a Clue is running from this possibility of that unmarked cruiser being present during this crucial time frame, it indicates he is attempting damage control. He claimed he spotted a Ford Fusion in the surveillance at 4:07 a.m., which is very odd, because at 4:07 a.m., the vehicle circles Queen Road apartments, and the view is even more obstructed heading in that direction, as opposed to the alleged Hyundai Elantra spotted at 4:05 a.m. Now, in Get a Clue's setting, you have 4 vehicles all running around in that neighborhood and within the same time frame. The Chrysler 300, the 2011 to 2020 white Hyundai Elantra, the Ford Fusion, and also the DoorDasher approximately all present in the 4 a.m. time frame. Such a traffic jam, and yet no footage from the neighbor's camera was released? Who leaked that screenshot? Was it the same so-called scammer who scammed the Linda Lane landlord out of their surveillance to be leaked? But why not show footage from King and Queen Road then? Because 2 of these vehicles were not spotted or even circling anywhere at any time. You can guess which ones they would be. The reason he claimed to spot a Ford Fusion is because many had already come to the conclusion that the unmarked cruiser, which is a Ford Fusion, was the vehicle circling the apartments. You guessed it, that was Get a Clue once again, executing damage control. You hear us mention that a lot, but do you guys really understand the purpose of it? Damage control is the limiting of damage, resulting from an action when damage cannot be avoided. The process of trying to limit the amount of damage that is caused by something or someone. In context of this case and this Linda Lane surveillance, the damage or evidence is that the unmarked cruiser/Ford Fusion was circling the apartments during the time frame those murders occurred. The attempt at controlling that damage or evidence is Get a Clue claiming to spot a Ford Fusion, but not claiming or even presenting a possibility that it was the unmarked cruiser. Claiming to spot a Ford Fusion is his way of deflecting from the fact that, well, the unmarked cruiser was also a Ford Fusion. But he does it in a way where the Ford Fusion is some random vehicle with no possible link to the unmarked cruiser. And the biggest form of damage control is claiming other vehicles were spotted, such as a Chrysler 300 and the alleged suspect's vehicle of a white Hyundai Elantra. Takes the attention away from the very Ford Fusion he claims was spotted. He never presented a possibility that the Ford Fusion was potentially a suspect, but he did with the Chrysler 300, and of course the alleged white Hyundai Elantra. So this is damage control. In attempts to deflect from the Ford Fusion, which is the same make and model and color, he claims to ironically spot in the surveillance. You understand? Okay, enough of that. Actually, that segues us to focusing on the vehicle spotted at 4:05 a.m. Now, simply put, the vehicle morphs into another vehicle within a few frames as the vehicle creeps forwards. When it comes to a complete stop, it resembles a Hyundai Elantra. But as we will point out, the vehicle moving forward literally is morphing into the alleged Hyundai Elantra, specifically the window panels. I mean, it was clearly visible, but only when you zoomed in could you spot it. Yep, I know it may sound crazy, but it's not uncommon. Morphing edits have been used in surveillance footage quite often. This is not new, my friends. There are two ways to morph something in a video. You can manually do it by going through each frame and editing the imagery, or actually morphing editing software, which does all of that manual work for you. Now, before we get started, let's examine the Hyundai Elantra's window panels and design and the Ford Fusion's window panels and design. They are similar, which made it easier to morph the vehicle's window designs from one to the other. We focus on the rear door glass and the rear door quarter glass, as that's the area Get a Clue determined was a Hyundai Elantra. The Hyundai Elantra's rear door and quarter glass has a curved incline, while the Ford Fusion's rear door and quarter glass is straight, then curves slightly at the end of the quarter glass. Now, keep this in mind as we break down the surveillance.
Okay, so what people need to realize with video editing is it's most effective when there is a visual distraction that makes the observer focus on that instead of what has been edited. It worked quite well in this Linda Lane surveillance because the vehicle is at a good distance from the camera and there is an obstruction of its complete body with the wooded fence blocking that view. In fact, that wooded fence appears to be edited as well. But let's get started. At 4:05 a.m., the vehicle is coming into view. Once it reaches the parking lot, there is clearly an edit of the vehicle's body type, specifically the window shape. Some may assume it's the low quality of the video, or when you zoom in, everything becomes pixelated. No, physical shapes do not change due to this. It may become a bit distorted due to pixelation and zooming, but the shape itself still maintains its, physical properties. Referencing the Kanika Jenkins surveillance footage that was edited beyond belief. The editor edited frames, meticulously cutting out things here, cutting out things there, which resulted in imagery in the surveillance that looked so horrible, everyone knew it was edited. But the key to their plan was that at a distance, the surveillance footage appeared normal. When people zoomed into the surveillance examining Kanika and her surroundings, there was clearly a lot of frames edited. And what was the purpose behind that? To create the illusion that she was by herself instead of the real footage that would show multiple people with her. And what was the purpose of the Linda Lane surveillance being edited? To create the illusion that a specific vehicle was spotted instead of the real vehicle that was spotted. Ironic that both cases have one person in common who examined the surveillance of both. Can you guess who that is? Gray Hughes. Damage control is the main objective. Alrighty, let's have at it. Okay, so you observe the surveillance in normal view with the vehicle at a distance. Now we will present the surveillance zoomed in on that area and the vehicle. If you noticed, the vehicle literally expands or stretches out as it reaches the point where it prepares to reverse. You may have seen it happening in playback, but we will scrub back and forth to show how the vehicle, quote, morphs into a white Hyundai Elantra's body type as far as the window design. This is not pixelation, low quality, none of that. This is what's physically happening to the vehicle in the surveillance footage. Scrubbing back and forth, we see that the shape of the vehicle is changing frame by frame. It has nothing to do with the fence or anything else that's physically there. The entire front and midsection of the vehicle is stretched out. It's not due to the vehicle moving that more of the window's shape or design is revealed, such as passing by the obstruction of segments of the fence. We see a clear view of the window and the top region of the vehicle creeping forward in several frames. It has been edited to appear to be a white Hyundai Elantra. Furthermore, if you look at the taillights and the bumper, that resembles the Ford Fusion more than the Hyundai Elantra. In fact, the car length resembles that of a Ford Fusion more than a Hyundai Elantra. The alleged 2011 to 2013 Hyundai Elantra is approximately 184 inches long, about 15 feet, while the Ford Fusion is approximately 191 inches long, about 16 feet. The length of the vehicle has been altered to make it appear shorter in certain frames, and those frames are when the main part of the vehicle is exposed. That's where the editing occurred the most. When the window is in clear view, you can physically see the vehicle stretching into another shape. Also, if you look closely, there is a dark, blotchy region right under the letters AM when the vehicle creeps past. It appears to be some sort of masking. As the vehicle approaches, there is a blotchy area near the ticker. It's smudged out. And the reason it's smudged out is because they concealed the true identity of the vehicle that was physically there, which was a Ford Fusion, being the unmarked cruiser. Take a close look. It's clearly smudged out to make everything appear to be a result of pixelation. Slick but not slick enough, someone went in and focused on each frame that clearly identified a specific vehicle and edited those frames in both smudging it out to conceal one vehicle's identity and editing other frames to make it appear to be another vehicle's identity. We've been down this road before, examining frame by frame of the Kanika-Jenkins surveillance. The same editing was used in that case. So, just to be authentic here, I would say we are 98% sure that this is not a white Hyundai Elantra and is actually the unmarked cruiser they obviously would have to hide.
I'm saying 100%. They tried, fooled a lot of people, of course, but we are not fools. The taillights resemble the Ford Fusion. Clearly, the vehicle was edited to look like a Hyundai Elantra, and you have a bunch of masking near that fence where the parking lot is. One would say, how could they edit the vehicle, which is behind the time? Wouldn't that be affected as well? There are many ways to edit surveillance with the real time still being displayed. But remember, the time displayed is not actually the physical footage. So even though the vehicle in the footage is behind the time displayed, that time can be moved all over the screen. And of course, it's obstructing the view of the vehicle as well. Mind you, this surveillance was released after Kohberger had been arrested and charged for the murders, meaning his vehicle was identified as the suspect, a white Hyundai Elantra. Well, what better way to convince the public with so-called tangible evidence than showing that white Hyundai Elantra in surveillance? And at the same time frame, they claim the murders were about to unfold? Remember, Moscow PD changed the time of death from approximately 3 a.m. to 4 a.m. based on Xana's alleged cell phone activity and DoorDash. So the timestamp of the alleged Kohberger's hunt is so-called justified with this crapfest of edited footage. Now, let's put this into perspective, because someone posted a comment that helps prove the point. Similar to the Kanika-Jenkins surveillance, the altering of video frames, this poster noticed the same problem with this Linda Lane surveillance. Quote, if a focus, they meant fusion. But anyway, if a fusion has been overlaid with an Elantra, that's trick work. I counted how many frames in each second from 40540 to 4555, and there's 1 at 20 frames per second, 9 at 24 FPS, 2 at 25 FPS, and 4 at 28 FPS. Is it normal for 40543 to have 20 FPS? Unquote. Frames per second were exposed in the Kanika-Jenkins surveillance, and I mean big time. The standard capture rate for surveillance is about 30 frames per second, depending on the type of camera, of course. But when the frame rate is cut down to perhaps 28 FPS, 25 FPS, 24 FPS, or 20 FPS, there are visual and physical effects that occur. At 4:05 and 42 seconds, the vehicle stops, then at 4:05 and 48 seconds, it creeps further before putting it in reverse. But the vehicle never stopped from that time frame. Frames were duplicated, and that's why it basically paused in motion, while the time continued to run. This is 8 seconds in the playback of the footage where the frames had been cut out. In the surveillance time, it's about 6 seconds as far as the time being displayed, but it's the frames per second that are physically being affected in the surveillance. Remember that time is not a part of the physical footage in surveillance. Again, referencing the Kanika Jenkins surveillance, the time may be displayed of when she was physically in a specific location, such as the conference lower level hall, right? But the physical footage itself had frames cut out while that time was running, or showing the time frame she was physically there. So although the time is being recorded in, quote, real time, the footage itself was altered by removing or adding frames within that real time. The Linda Lane surveillance, which has the vehicle basically paused from 4:05 and 42 seconds to 4:05 and 48 seconds, was to allow or convince the viewer to so-called spot the white Hyundai Elantra. You have to remember, this is dealing with frames in video, so each frame can be tweaked, drawing a small black line here, smudging a bit of black there, smudging a gray spot over this portion of the fence, which obstructs the view of the vehicle pulling up, etc. Each frame with that editing would create a different image than what previously was displayed. And in motion, like flash animations, it appears to be authentic motion of the vehicle. Nothing is wrong, just a bit of blur and pixelation from the camera zoomed in. Nope. Examining each frame, you can see that the vehicle moving forwards in each frame has been edited to match the description of the Elantra's body style. This was released after Kohberger was arrested. We have to keep reiterating that because it is why the Elantra would even be basically drawn into the surveillance. And Get a Clue also traced the outline of the Elantra's window style, could have been the one to draw that style into the surveillance. For this to happen, you would need someone who knows about vehicles and their physical appearance. Get a Clue claims to be a car guru, always pointing out specific details of vehicles to determine make and model. Right? This Linda Lane surveillance was dumped out here approximately 7 to 8 months ago, which would be June or July of 2023. Get a Clue's first video on the case was in June of 2023. I mean, call it a coincidence if you want, but we know better. The unmarked cruiser was a light silver Ford Fusion hybrid model. This vehicle was in the neighborhood based on body cam footage from 2:54 a.m. to approximately 3:15 a.m. Kaylee and Maddie had called Jack within this very time frame. The mainstream media claims there was a 911 call made at 3 a.m. This was allegedly for students stumbling around outside who were drunk. But the unmarked cruiser was there prior to 3 a.m. because their presence at 2:54 a.m. meant either they were just making their rounds in the neighborhood on a Saturday night, or there was a call prior to the alleged 3 a.m. call, which had to be approximately from 2:40 a.m. to 2:50 a.m. for them to be arriving at 2:54 a.m. We went over this, so everyone criticizing the chaos need to really pay attention. All of this is linked to our overall investigation. Okay, so the unmarked cruiser is physically there prior to the alleged 3 a.m. call. And that's a mystery as well, because I'm just going to state that nobody called the cops on college students drunk, because that would more than likely be other college students who made that call, and they're not snitching on other students. No way. So who made the 911 call and what was it for? Whoever it was seems it was about the victim's household. We can logically suggest that. An older individual could have called because the yelling and screaming was not typical party noises. There was violence. Mind you, all of those body cam videos were about neighbors calling about noise disturbances from that home. But how would we, on the outside looking in, know that those neighbors actually had a problem with the partying? Many have pointed out that officers gave off a creeper vibe in dealing with those housemates. Now, we wanted to point this out prior, and I guess now's the time to address it. In the day body cam with Kaylee and Hunter, the officer grabs Kaylee's ID and takes a photo of it. There are only 2 reasons why that photo was taken. When responding to a noise complaint, officers may document the incident for future reference. Taking a photo of Kaylee's ID helps them accurately record details related to the call. Instead of writing the information down manually, This helps the officer process information faster. Now, they do have the legal right to do this, so keep that in mind. The other scenario is the officer wanted to get Kaylee's ID'd so he can track her, or better yet, stalk her. This is what many basically assumed. It's not determined on what his intentions were. But the thing that stood out to me is that Kaylee whispered something to the other officer, recording for the body cam footage. Now, I'm not talking about the initial interaction when she comes out and smiles. I'm not talking about smiling and joking with the officers during the conversation. And the other officer is standing to the right, and she whispers something to him, like telling him something in secret. Maybe flirting is the wrong word in scenario, but there was something she told the other officer. Because Kaylee was looking at that officer, she was saying something to him in a way that he would pick up on it, as it was not heard by the other officer and obviously not the audio. Oh, I remember when it happened, by memory, even if we can't find it. It's when the officer pulls out his phone and takes a photo of her idea. That's when it happened. That's when we noticed Kaylee whispering something to him. So here are screenshots of the distant body cam version of the other officer. Maybe it was about feeling uncomfortable with that officer taking her photo. Could be. Or she could have been whispering something to the officer taking the photo and was watching the other officer to make sure, he wouldn't know what was being said. They clipped out the body cam footage in that specific moment. It's perhaps somewhere, but we examined most of the videos of that body cam footage, and we examined every moment of his body cam right in Kaylee's face, and we didn't see it. But from the other officer's body cam, we spotted the moment the communication was relayed. We'll perhaps examine the actual video footage to gain context from it. The point here is there was something suspicious going on with that entire interaction. She was smiling when she whispered it, and honestly, it almost appeared she was flirting with him. I know, everyone don't get all bent out of shape about that, but she obviously secretly communicated something to him specifically. The reason I pointed this incident out is maybe those beat cops in that area had the hots for some of those girls. Using fake noise complaints to justify interacting with those girls up close and personal, that's what a creeper cop would do. They knew who stayed there, although on the outside looking in, many assumed they were trying to find out who stayed there. The few times that they released the body cam footage for noise complaints wouldn't have just popped up over a few weeks or months. That was a party house. They would know how many people stay there. They would even know them by name, at least some of the officers anyway. And this is how they are directly associated with not only that home, but also aware of or involved with the drug trafficking that Bonnie and Clyde had going on in the town. So, when something happens, they are right in the area and had involvement either directly or indirectly of what happened. Perhaps this was Dot? She remained anonymous and called about the screaming. The unmarked cruiser tiptoes into the neighborhood, pretending to deal with drunk guys in Banfield, when in reality, they were stalling time to let those housemates be, quote, taken care of. Yeah, I know it sounds horrible, but this type of shit happens throughout society and throughout the world. Allowing crimes to happen to protect the big fish that pull you by the strings. They knew what was going on, and they knew what had happened. The Ford Fusion, that Get a Clue claims to identify, crept around Queen Road apartments, spying on the victim's home. One of them got out, went to the home, while the other continued to circle around the apartments. This is where the "it's okay, I'm here to help you" comes from. After everything had been, quote, cleared, the partner gets back inside, they make one more trip around the apartments and finally leave the neighborhood. And this would be perhaps when Bonnie arrives, with her so-called DoorDash delivery. Moscow PD definitely knew who she was, and Clyde as well. See, this is based on corruption, which leads to secrets, which leads to cover-ups, which leads to frames. Some would say, oh, come on, Chaos, there's no proof of that. And why would they be circling around the apartments while those housemates were being massacred? First off, those murders were more than likely already accomplished by 3:30 a.m. when the vehicle is first spotted circling around the apartments. Second, the time frame is approximately, hold on, just think about this, 3:15 a.m. was the last time we saw any body cam footage. I don't care about someone claiming there is body cam footage from some call about stealing stop signs around 4:15 a.m. Nobody has produced it. Some claim Truth and Transparency has it, who somehow is just getting all types of shit that nobody else has access to. If it exists, why hasn't it circulated through the true crime community? And it doesn't matter, because like we pointed out, to get a clue, that is irrelevant to the time frame from 2:54 a.m. to 3:15 a.m. and 3 a.m. to 4:07 a.m. Where were they after 3:15 a.m.? Nobody can prove this. And if Get a Clue is claiming to spot the same make and model of the unmarked cruiser in the Linda Lane surveillance, everything we just presented as a possible scenario becomes highly likely. If he would have examined the vehicle creeping forward like we did, he wouldn't conclude it was a white Hyundai Elantra, because he would see the editing unfolding frame by frame. We are presenting evidence, evidential analysis. This is not a white Hyundai Elantra. A Ford Fusion was the vehicle there from 3:30 a.m. to 4:07 a.m. Get a Clue scurries away from this Ford Fusion because he knows that's the vehicle circling Queen Road Apartments. But it's ironic, isn't it? If his supporters claim that Get a Clue believes Kohberger is innocent, and many of his videos allude to Kohberger being framed, then why wouldn't he at least present the possibility that it was the unmarked cruiser circling the apartments? Because it's all a bunch of misdirection and damage control. He is attempting to control the damage of that evidence. It proves without a doubt that Kohberger was framed for the murders, and he is not here to prove Kohberger is innocent of the charges. He's not here to question if Kohberger is innocent or not. He is here to control the damage that that evidence would bring to the case. Joined November 8th of 2022, yet the first video on the case was June of 2023. Approximately the same time the Linda Lane surveillance was so-called leaked. It was not leaked. It was released by law enforcement after the editing had been done, alluding to Kohberger being physically there that night. Nothing has been leaked. It was released in connection to law enforcement's approval. Better yet, the FBI's dirty hands giving the thumbs up. Ever wonder why the neighbor's security camera footage has never been released, yet a screenshot was timed at 1:56 a.m.? Speaking of that, we just keep putting pressure on Get a Clue. He claimed that the so-called FBI expert spotted a 2011 to 2013 white Hyundai Elantra, and it was more than likely from the neighbor's camera footage. Right? Well, this would have to be before the December 7th press release of the make, model, and year of the suspect's vehicle. Now, during a time frame they are searching for a suspect, and a 2011-2013 white Hyundai Elantra was allegedly spotted by that neighbor's camera, this would have been released to the public, not a fucking screenshot later on, so-called leaked out. If the FBI, yes, the Alphabet Boys, had spotted this vehicle in that surveillance, the suspect is still at large, that surveillance is released to inform the public. Okay, we went over this crap. Anywho, the reason it was never released is because there is no white Hyundai Elantra spotted in that footage. The only alleged Elantra is in the Linda Lane surveillance, which was edited to make it be that vehicle. And individuals like Get a Clue, who proclaims to be a car guru, uses that to convince his audience that he spotted a white Hyundai Elantra in the Linda Lane surveillance. Yo, Get a Clue. Hey man, do you believe it's Kohberger? No, I don't. Based on my evidential analysis, it's a 2011 to 2013 white Hyundai Elantra. But how can you tell that's the year range from that surveillance? Well, the FBI expert spotted that year, so it's the same year in the surveillance. But wait a minute, so you're saying it's not Kohberger's vehicle. So how did the same FBI track his vehicle then? I don't know. I think they may have gotten conflicting information. But wait a minute. You said they spotted that specific vehicle in surveillance, right? Wouldn't they know which vehicle was identified? Yeah, that's true. But my ass, man, you're confusing me right now. What are you telling me? If the FBI expert claimed to spot a 2011 to 2013 white Hyundai Elantra, then change it to 2011 to 2016, those can be identified by significant differences, right? Why would they include the later models? Listen, man, I don't know why they included those later models. I'm just going based on what I see in the surveillance. That's a white Hyundai Elantra. What are you confused about? I'm confused because you claim to spot this white Hyundai Elantra in the Linda Lane surveillance, yet Moscow PD nor the FBI expert claim to spot that vehicle from that surveillance. Also, don't you find it a bit odd that this surveillance was released after Koberger was already arrested? I mean, the landlord claimed they were scammed into giving it to some random person whose identity has been concealed. The FBI expert and Moscow PD had obtained that surveillance 2 days after the murders. So if the FBI expert had identified a 2011 to 2013 white Hyundai Elantra, why didn't they release this surveillance early on in the case to notify the public about this potential killer? Don't you find all of this a bit strange? What the fuck do I look like, a fucking private investigator or some shit? I don't know anything about all of that. I'm just examining the surveillance. That's all. It's a white Hyundai Elantra. I don't think it's Koberger's vehicle, but it is the same vehicle. What about the Ford Fusion? You said you spotted a Ford Fusion at 4:07 a.m., right? Could that be the same unmarked cruiser that was in the neighborhood earlier? You never really gave any opinions on that vehicle. I mean, it is the same make and model and color, right? Whoever it is, could they be involved? No, that Ford Fusion was spotted at 4:07 a.m., and if it was the unmarked cruiser, they had a call about 4:15 a.m., so I don't think it was there circling the apartments or anything like that. Hey, wait a minute. There's a few issues, though. You do claim to spot a Ford Fusion, so that vehicle was in the neighborhood, correct? So if that vehicle was in the neighborhood around 4:07 a.m., and you claim the white Hyundai Elantra was spotted at 4:05 a.m., I mean, it gets kind of confusing as to what's really going on here, you know? They would have to have seen the white Hyundai Elantra enter the neighborhood, and if that's the suspect, they witnessed something. But more importantly, get a clue. No offense, but the call at 4:15 a.m. doesn't prevent the unmarked cruiser from being there around the time frame the murders had occurred. Wouldn't you agree? It is not the goddamn unmarked cruiser. You can't prove that shit. Stop making wild speculations. You have to go based on evidential analysis. Don't run off with some theories. Hey man, all I'm saying is I recently viewed a video examination from Chaos Sector, and they point out that the vehicle you claim to be a white Hyundai Elantra looks a bit funny. What? Are you kidding me? Yeah, no, I'm serious. You might want to check that video out because it sure looks like there's some editing going on with that vehicle. Oh, now they've edited a vehicle into the surveillance, just to make it appear to be a white Hyundai Elantra. More wild and outrageous speculations from that channel. Man, what are you smoking? I'm smoking eyes that are looking right at the edits. That's what I'm smoking. And wouldn't you agree, the gas station surveillance leaked was clearly edited? That's a screenshot. It's not surveillance. That isn't the point, man. It's the fact that the screenshot was edited. You know what? I'm done talking to you. Go subscribe to Chaos Sector, then get the fuck out of here. Hey, fuck you, man. I'm just asking questions. Maybe I will follow Chaos Sector. At least they're attempting to put pieces of the puzzle together. You shouldn't be denying the possibility that footage has been edited. I mean, you're creating all types of wacky settings in that neighborhood. You have like 3 cars driving around during the time frame the murders occurred. And then what about the DoorDash driver? They would be in the neighborhood as well. It's like how can you claim a Ford Fusion was there at 4:07 a.m.? Everybody would assume it's the unmarked cruiser. They drove the same fucking vehicle. Man, why won't you just accept that as a possibility? It's like you're hiding something. You know what? You can go fuck the entire fuck off. And to think I donated hundreds to your so-called investigating, well, you're not getting a penny from me anymore. This is the Chaos Sector.